Hello, New Zealand, Bob McCoskrie, and to my left is Simon O'Connor. How are you, Simon?
I'm just recovering from the fact you're saying I'm to your left. I mean, that's quite concerning. Oh, you're talking about physically. Oh, that's good.
No, I'm sure you're definitely to the right. Nice to have you back, and I hear you're fighting off the dreaded lurgy, is it something like that?
Yeah, some sort of fever going around that's laid me a little low, but as things would have it, it's still been quite a busy day. But that's all good. It's all good.
Okay, well, without further ado, just a reminder that you can comment to us on Facebook, but you need to go to the Facebook page for Family First. So Family First Facebook page, and you also need to go to the YouTube. You can comment there, so we will grab those comments. If you're watching on any other platforms, that's fine. But if you want to give us some feedback or put a question or answer, I've got a little poll question coming up halfway through, actually. Haven't we, Simon? We want to find out, what was the question? The question is, that's right, genetic engineering. Yeah. Do you agree or disagree with the genetic engineering, which we will come back to? But what I want to do first is do a little bit of general business, because there are a few things happening. The first one, just very quickly, is that there's a review of the End of Life Choice Act. Could you just give us a quick update on that?
Long and short, it's been run by the Ministry of Health and well supported by those who actually put the law through in the first place. And what they're wanting to do is expand it effectively. That's the undertone of everything that's been asked. So think about, instead of 6 months, they want it to be 12 or 18, more conditions. There's even some question around conscience rights. In other words, can doctors and nurses and hospice workers decline? So that's the push. But there is this survey. You can go online to the Ministry of Health. Only takes 10 or so minutes, and you've got up till the 28th of this month to do so. Next month, but get onto it today.
Okay, and also people can go to our website, go to familyfirst.nz, click on research, and you will see basically Simon has written up a really nice introduction, has even given you some ideas of how to answer some of the questions, some guidelines, so you're not starting from scratch. It's just a beautiful, well-written document by Simon, and that's on our website, familyfirst.nz, under research, but we'd like you to be part of that review, because obviously it's a very important issue. Simon, Parliament is not actually sitting this week. Are the politicians all on holiday?
There's always the perception when they have a recess week, but no, look, but basically if they're not in Wellington, which they're not for Parliament, then they're back in their electorates by and large. So actually the recesses are, I found, exceptionally busy, because for the 2, 3 or 4 weeks you're down in the Parliament, all your local issues just build up. So in a recess week, it's often from early morning through to the evening. You're just doing one constituent after another, school visits, retirement, home visits, you name it. So it's a pretty full-on time.
Okay, and the other issue that I just wanted to quickly cover was that there's been a lot of discussion around the New Zealand pandemic plan. I've had a lot of people email me saying, am I aware that it's almost going to be the end of the world, according to some people? But I've also seen some very interesting commentary. Now, a lot of people may not realise that you were actually in the House as a politician when some of this was going through. So can you just, allay our fears? Is there some new plan out that is going to take COVID lockdowns and masks, mandates and all that type of stuff to a whole new level?
Short answer is no. But the nuances kick in that this is an interim plan, so it's an update on previous pandemic plans. So that's probably the first thing for people to understand, that governments are always preparing plans. So this is an update. It does feel a little premature because they've updated it before the inquiry into COVID is concluded. But it's also really important for people to remember the original legislation, which everyone's getting a bit worried about, was passed in 1956. So a lot of people are upset that medical officers, and then perhaps with the assistance of police, will be able to force you into your home, force you to be vaccinated. Look, that's been on the books, or that power, if you will, has been on the books since 1956. And that doesn't mean that it could not happen, but it's going to take very particular acts of Parliament to bring that into force. So it's not the doom and gloom which people are suggesting.
Okay, I did see some very good commentary, and it was from Kirsten Murfitt, who was actually I think, what party did she stand for? I can't remember. Was it New Zealand First?
I don't think it was New Zealand first. I can't remember, but she's a lawyer and actually is quite good on this stuff. So the main thing for people to understand is that the powers are not new. They've always been there, but to be activated takes some very specific actions by Parliament, even more than what we saw during COVID times. So look, it's, you can make the argument, Bob, that because the powers are there, they could be used. Look, Parliament could pass a law tomorrow banning all podcasts if they wanted. So, we've got to be a little bit prudent around these things. It could. Just this one, probably.
They'll specifically target it. Well, actually, somebody has a question on that basis, and that is that Rosie says, is it true that police can enter your house without a warrant and forcibly vaccinate you?
Short answer to Rosie is no. Yeah, it's no. And look, I think it's a bit of a stretch to suggest that's going to happen. I just want to keep reinforcing to people, these pandemic laws are in the Health Act from 1956. Okay,
let's move on to some specific topics. And look, I was really interested in this one because I've got some beef in this particular area. So, Simon, just to remind us, back in 2020, the New Zealand Drug Foundation decided to tell everybody to vote yes to legalising cannabis. Front page ads in the Weekend Herald cost them a bucket load of cash. And then last year, front page of the New Zealand Herald, oh, look at this, hit piece on Christopher Luxon. That's very interesting. So there's two hit pieces, but when we turned up with a lovely ad that said, what is a woman, what is your mum, inside the newspaper, suddenly we were persona non grata and not allowed. Anyway, the Herald must have done a bit of a review and decided that they would allow this advert from Hobsons Pledge. And interestingly enough, the information on the front is a summary. Now, so this is Dom Brash's organisation, and it says the map that's shown on the front there is sourced from the Māori Crown Relations Office website in terms of what customary marine titles gives people in the fact that claims now circle the entire coast. So they're saying restore the foreshore and seabed to public ownership. Can you help us out, Simon? Did the law change? Is it possible that public ownership could be taken away from all beaches and we're going to have to pay a fee when we go to our favourite beach at summer?
It's probably not so much a fee, but there is a possibility. Look, so much of this works around the word ownership. As the current law exists, in some ways no one owns the foreshore. And that's what some of the activists are saying, and therefore that this ad is wrong. But what's really important to understand is that customary title, while not formally ownership, would allow iwi, as they already do in some places, to put down rahui, waihu, tapu, and other things. So they can exert, if you will, a degree of control.
Right.
The context around this was that you might remember Helen Clark got into a lot of trouble years ago around the seabed and foreshore, big protests. So then the national government came in. So that was John Key and Chris Finlayson who passed the current law. It's called the Marine and Coastal Act. And they suggested that if you can prove continuing use of the foreshore from today back to 1840, then you can claim some customary title. And they thought that would be about 10% of our coastline. But some judges, some have described them, Bob, as activist judges, have reinterpreted it to now basically all and every beach is up for grabs for customary title. So not strictly ownership, but it is a form of control.
Okay, so there is some truth to this. And in fact, Hobsons Pledge, because of the uproar and a number of politicians attacking them, calling them racist. In fact, I think Willie Jackson said that is the Herald going to take money from the KKK next? White supremacist movement. I mean, typical hysterics. But the Hobsons Pledge wanted to do this fact check, but they weren't allowed. The Herald said, well, no, we just can't put up with any more pressure. So it does. We're back to the what is a woman fiasco, which is that effectively media companies, newspapers are vetting what we are seeing and what we're not seeing. My argument with the What is a Woman campaign was that if they're blocking ads like that, then what narratives are they also blocking in terms of their news coverage?
Oh, look, 100%. I mean, we already know that
a rhetorical question.
Oh, right. Well, But he jumps in anyway. But look, the media already censors to a degree what you can and can't see. Just look at the coverage of what's been happening in the UK. It's very biased. And now you're right. They're not even going to accept organisations' money. It's completely arbitrary. So you've nailed it, Bob. They'll take the money from the Drug Foundation, but they won't take them from likes of Hobsons Pledge. They've made life difficult even for, it's what's called the Child Poverty Action Group. So it's all becoming, as I say, arbitrary. And these are often fraught topics that we need to debate. But as you can see from Willie Jackson and Te Pāti Māori, and now the NZME crew, they don't want you to debate. You just have to accept their viewpoint.
Yeah. Okay, well done. Right, let's just check. Lynette just reminds us that Kirsten stood for New Zealand First. So, but
she did. Oh, good.
Yeah, but I do just follow Kirsten Murfitt's X page because she does put up some very good legal documents, and there's still free speech on X, so you still are allowed to get away with it. All right, let's move on to topic number 3, and well, the Police Association are concerned because Nicole McKee, the ACT MP, was a gun lobbyist, and she's now in the ACT Party, and she's part of the process to oversee the gun register, and she made these comments. So there was a bit of a argument between the Police Association and Nicole McKee as to why the Police Association weren't involved in the process. Have a watch.
She's a gun lobbyist.
He's a lobbyist himself.
The association, which has long campaigned for tougher gun rules, isn't being consulted.
Nicole McKee has a dispute or beef with Chris Cahill and the Police Association. I think she doesn't agree with their position, and so she's trying to exclude them from the process. It's anti-democratic.
Well, I don't think it's me that has the personal beef here. I think that I've been quite professional in the way that I've gone about this entire process.
Did you personally have the Police Association removed?
I asked for certain groups to be included and not included. With the Police Association, I probably did say there was no need for them because we have New Zealand Police.
And yet the Labour Party's obtained emails showing police wrote to justice officials questioning why the Police Association was not being consulted, saying, "What gives?"
What gives? Well, I think the bigger question here, Simon, I was interested to ask you, is you've got a lobbyist who has become a member of Parliament, and actually not the only one. I was thinking of, is it Andrew Hoggard, who was involved with the farmers?
Pharmaceuticals, pharmaceuticals.
No, farmers, as in farmers.
Oh, farmers.
Yeah.
There was another one from ACT who's been in the pharmaceutical space as well. So there's a couple of them.
Okay, and there was Chris Bishop, who was involved as a tobacco lobbyist, and I'm sure there's been some lobbyists in the other parties as well. And so the question is, if you are a lobbyist and then you go in and you become a Minister of the Crown, is there a conflict of interest? And should Nicole McKee, basically, in your opinion, be involved in the process of putting together laws around gun registers, or at least putting proposals before Cabinet?
If I could answer it in two ways, I've got no problem with people who have been lobbyists going into Parliament and becoming MPs. You're never going to have a situation where an MP turns up with sort of a clean rap sheet. You know, we all have our philosophies and views or faiths, you name it, and all sorts of jobs. You know, we're going to say teachers can't be education ministers and so forth. So that's the first thing. I don't think we need to worry about that. I mean, look, on the left, most of them have been in the union movement. You know, where's the media jumping up and down every time they're talking about labour relation laws? But I think Nicole McKee is out of line, actually pushing the Police Association out of this debate. It doesn't look good for her, no matter what you think of the union, and that's what the Police Association is. They do represent our police officers, and it's normal to have them speak. So it's not a good look. I don't think that helps her argument. I mean, put it really simply, Bob, why did she just not let them speak? You can then choose to listen to it or ignore it.
The interesting thing is what's the difference between the police and the Police Association? Because are they basically the same voice? Will they be singing from the same sheet? I assume not, from what I've seen.
Probably not. So the police it'll be like Commissioner Costa and the senior commanders. The Police Association is the police officers' union. And so they have usually, but not always, a different perspective on issues. But just think about it like the teachers' union. You can have the Ministry of Education come in and talk to you, but you'll also have the teacher union, the truckers' union, and the pilots' union. So, the police association will have valid concerns, and they won't always align with police commanders.
Okay, right, let's move on. We're going through these topics really well. Breaking news from today, and that was around the disability issue. And so there was a Ministry of Disabled People called Whaikaha, which, to be honest, I'm sorry, I'd never heard of before. But anyway, it's going to be restructured, and there was an announcement about that.
Last government created Whaikaha while it was restructuring the health system during a pandemic and didn't take the time to get it right. The last government created Whaikaha while it was restructuring the health system during a pandemic and didn't take the time to get it right.
Yeah, we heard that, but
our government will build a fairer, sustainable support system that delivers better outcomes for disabled people based on need. Funding isn't the issue here. We provided a record $1.1 billion funding boost to disability support services in Budget 24. This is a system issue. We need to act fast to get the right financial controls in place. So we have accepted...
Okay, I'd like to blame Gordon for that technical glitch, but I can't. It was my fault, so never mind. But anyway, you got the point. I thought it was just interesting, Simon, in that they blew its $2.6 billion funding 6 weeks into the current fiscal year. They were on course to blow their funding, despite receiving a generous top-up in the budget. And, I mean, Louise Upston was putting a bit of a boot into Labour. Although, in fairness, it's been going on for about 10 years. They just sort of made the problem worse by creating this whole new body at a time when people were just trying to catch up and get through COVID, etc. So whose fault is it?
It's probably a mixture across the parties. I mean, if you try to take a bit of a step back, every government's going to blame the previous government for what's being done. But, I mean, the last government's intention was to, in many ways, decentralise things. So like with Whaikaha, or the Ministry for Disabled, instead of having it within the wider Ministry of Social Development or Ministry of Health, it was to sit on its own. So it was to do policy, it was to provide advice, and really importantly, it was meant to be the provider of services, or the conduit for services. That's where it seems to have failed spectacularly by just blowing money as if it's been printed off a printer. Getting my metaphors mixed. So what's been announced today is basically organisation is going to go back to basically just policy, advice, and the service side of things is going to be run by the Ministry of Social Development. So there's two really quick points on that. One is by going back into MSD, or social development, you have that massive structure and system to support. But I will note there are a number of people in the disabled community who are not happy about this. They feel they're going to lose quite a bit of control. And I can understand that.
Okay, I was thinking back to, is it ACT MP Penny Simmons, who was in charge of this? National, okay. Well, now as a independent commentator for a family group, I get the impression that she had identified an issue and possibly was trying to deal with it, and she got hung out to dry. Is that just my impression?
She certainly got hung out to dry, but I think she didn't, by the look of it, get enough of a handle on what was happening, unfortunately. So in other words, it's what happened to her is not completely without basis, but I think two sort of things that ended up happening is that she reacted probably a bit too strongly around the budget blowout. And then that got not so much misreported, but blown up in media as, they're cutting all the funding. And so she got a hatchet from media, and that forced Luxon's hand, or rather he wanted to look strong. So it was an easy win for him. Yeah,
if I remember rightly, she was calling out caregivers because they were spending money on something. I can't remember what it was, but of course the media were keen to have a go on this issue. And so it just seemed like she seemed to be the victim, but it's almost as though because of what the review found and because of the massive financial blowout, that actually she was partly right, just didn't communicate it very well.
I think that's actually a really good summary. And unfortunately for some politicians, be they MPs or ministers, timing is everything. You could pull Melissa Lee into this as well around the broadcasting. I actually don't think she was saying anything wrong. But the media, just like they did with disability, decided that they were going to attack. And that then causes the situation we see today. And you've got new ministers doing, in effect, the same thing. But media's either moved on or decided they don't want to attack them. It's all this arbitrariness, which I suppose is one of the themes without realising today. There is just so many arbitrary decisions being made by government, by media.
Okay, just a couple of the comments. Kevin says, every time you specialise, you add more admin and more cost, which is true. And Rosie says, she's just back on the vaccine thing. How would the police know that someone who lives in a certain house is unvaccinated? They don't have access to people's medical records. Nobody can get access to records without gaining consent. In those documents, it's clearly not about forced vaccinations, but it is about safety issues. Actually, my wife's family were involved in this because one of the, was it a grandparent or something, got, what was that disease back in the 40s, 50s?
Polio.
Yeah, polio, that's right. And so their house actually was in lockdown, what we would call a COVID lockdown, but it was about a safety issue and not sharing around. I mean, that's part of the reason I'm not in the same room as you right now, Simon, because the last thing I want is to catch the lurgy from Christchurch. So apologies to Christchurch people, but he got it while he was down there. Is that correct?
Brought it back to share around. Yeah, I did. I was at a conference. It was lovely. But yeah, I think the key thing is it is around, you just nailed it. It's a power that the Director of Health can actually compel someone to stay at home if required. But very lightly used, although we did see it around the quarantining during COVID, the hotels and stuff. So again, there's some truth, but I just wouldn't encourage people to exaggerate it too much.
Yeah, and I think in fairness, there is a nervousness simply because of what we saw, the overstepping of powers. But at the same time, I think that overstepping has actually created a resistance so strong that a government would have to be pretty, I mean, we all, I think in fairness, we all sort of bought into it to a certain extent, some more than others, rightly or wrongly, but we bought into it because we were so unsure of what was going on. Now we're in a situation where we know so much more, and I don't think a government would be brave enough to do what was done in 2020 with the same set of facts.
I'd tend to agree. I mean, look, fear is a strange thing. I mean, I've theorised in my own little mind, the philosopher in me, of how this would happen if, media drummed up the next pandemic. I think a lot of people would return to fear, but I think there's enough of us now who say, no, we're having enough. The other quick point, Bob, is trust in our authorities. So it doesn't matter if it's government, parliament, health services, dare I put media in there as an authority, is almost at an all-time low. And so you are getting quite a rational response to this. People they don't trust the government. They don't trust what they say. And by the way, it doesn't matter who's in government. It's just that trust level is down.
Yep. Okay. Next topic, and it is, are we kicking people while they're down? And it's based on these new sanctions on beneficiaries. Once again, there's been a bit of media coverage. Let's just watch a couple of clips.
You have obligations to actually look for work, to show up for interviews, to show up for the seminars, and make sure that you're compliant.
Under a new traffic light system, those who comply with their benefits are in the green, but fail an obligation like a workshop or meeting and it's on to orange with 5 days to sort it out. Failed that and it's straight to red, slapped with sanctions.
Instead of going straight to a reduction of their benefit, we're providing an alternative.
New sanctions include doing community service work and having 50% of your benefit put onto an electronic money card, which can only be used in certain stores. The ACT Party took the idea from Australia.
When they introduced electronic cards, there was less money on drugs, alcohol and tobacco and gambling, more money on baby food and nappies.
Let's make it really clear that compulsory money management is about control and punishment. It hasn't worked in Australia, and it definitely won't work in Aotearoa.
ACT also tried but failed to impose it on women who have more children while on a benefit.
The question is, what is the role of the government and the taxpayer to keep giving you a pay increase for each child that you have?
While the new sanctions are targeting those on the job seeker allowance, any beneficiary, including those on sole parent support, will be targeted.
So I'd say to those parents, it's pretty simple. We've got common sense rules around what you need to do to comply.
Yeah, okay. Seems to be a lot of common sense. Of course, Labor came out against it because they say it is beneficiary bashing, which of course the lovely friendly reporter gave as a patsy question, which you'll hear.
From the government today is yet more example of their willingness to kick people when they're down rather than focus on getting people back to work. There's about 18,000 fewer jobs now than there were when the National Party became the lead party in government. If you take, say, building and construction, for example, in that sector alone there are 6,000 fewer jobs than there were when National became the government. They should be focused on getting people back into work rather than kicking people when they're down. Happy to go to questions.
Are they beneficiary bashing?
Absolutely. This is classic National. There are more people on...
This is classic media. Right. So, I mean, it does seem like if you are getting some free support from the state, there should be some expectations. And I'm not quite sure why people disagree with that. But is this an unfair expectation?
Look, it won't surprise you and viewers that I don't think it's unfair. But there's two philosophies here. You know, Labor and the Greens for sure believe that a benefit is your right, and you can have it for as long as you want for whatever reason, and it should never be taken away for you, no matter what. It's just a right. Those more on the right of politics. Awkward sentence there, but those of us on the right say actually there are obligations and responsibilities. So we are prepared to work as we do and pay our taxes, but there are expectations on those on benefit to actually work towards a job. And so Hipkins is wrong and playing a distraction. No one is going to be sanctioned for not getting a job. Unemployment's at 4.6% at the moment. It's quite high. What they're going to be sanctioned for is repeated attempts of not turning up to meet their case manager, not turning up to courses, or not turning up to interviews. And that's, to me, very reasonable. And again, to get the money control, that 50% of your benefit is now controlled, you've got to have broken the rules multiple times. And go, oh, by the way, get this, Bob. Under Labor, if you had a warrant out for your arrest, you would still get paid the benefit. They wouldn't even sanction you at that stage. So that's how out of control it's got.
Okay, I am interested in just a particular area, and that is that ACT wants harsher sanctions if you're a beneficiary and you have children. Part of me says, well, I'm not surprised that ACT are anti-children, anti-life, because that's their reputation. But on the other side of me, it says, well, is it good for a family if they're already struggling and to have a child maybe get a job and then... But look, can we dictate to people? Just before you comment on that, one of the funny things was that I saw some left-wing people quoting from the human rights document that talks about families have a right to have children and that family is a fundamental backbone of our state. And I thought that was highly ironic because that was the argument we used in the Supreme Court, and they said, well, that attitude has no public benefit. We did actually quote that particular document from the UN, but here's the left quoting it because it happens to fit the narrative at the moment that beneficiaries should have as many children as they want. And sorry, I'm on a bit of a rant here, but that was the problem with the DPB when it came in the 70s, is that no longer did you need a committed father because the state became the daddy for many, and so therefore that's why we often have many fatherless families, because the father is not financially responsible, can just take off. So anyway, that's my rant. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'd probably echo a lot of your things. I mean, there's a part of me that doesn't like the fact of multiple children and just this expectation that the state will always step in. But I think that is trumped by my belief that actually children, families are important. And I think it's ironic. Again, someone like ACT is not particularly pro-family. I mean, they're incredibly, strong on the abortion question, and yet, everyone's got to have their choice, and yet somehow now they're wanting to interfere in these people's lives. So I suppose I'd prefer we stick to the principle that, if you're having children, we will step in and help. And maybe the solution is not punishing them. Again, a very hard-nosed, right? I'd say people who don't really understand children, to be honest. It's probably more about wrapping support around those women and those families is probably the better way to go than punishing.
I mean, I was interested just back to the beneficiary that if you did get penalised, you got the same amount of money, but some of it was locked. Half the benefit was paid onto a payment card that could only be used for essential items like food or clothes. And so once again, it's actually not getting less money. It's actually getting a bit of guidance to, you could almost say a bit of parenting help to get a person's life back on track. But the left seem to be against any accountability or responsibility, and it's all about free handouts. I guess that's a typical Marxist viewpoint, is it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the left, by and large, believe that beneficiary money is their money. It's theirs by right. They're owed it by society. Someone like myself would say, well, no, actually, it's not your money. It's mine, actually, and every other person who works and pay taxes. And we're happy to give it. But we expect some responsibility from it. And I think, it's about more support. I mean, the money card, if it's going to help people budget, that's great. But I will just say one thing. I think we do want to avoid sort of the suggestion that every beneficiary is blowing money. I mean, again, ACT fell into this. They always do, trying to say that everyone's spending money on booze and chips and KFC. That's not been my experience, actually. It's really tough living on a benefit. So you can support people, but you can also expect or give them obligations. So again, no problem with this traffic light system. I think it's quite proportionate.
And in fact, in fairness, Christopher Luxon, when they announced it with Louise Upston, actually did say that most beneficiaries are responsible. They're doing their best to improve their situation where possible. This is dealing with the career beneficiaries who just don't want to do anything and are happy to stay home and smoke joints. So, that's probably a fair point. All right, let's keep going. We're going at great pace. Now, genetic engineering. Back in 2002, before you were born, Simon, there was a fascinating interview with Nicky Hager. He did a book, Seeds of Distrust. He alleged that there was a field of genetically modified corn. And so that was election year, and Helen Clark was trying to get re-elected for the first time, so she'd been in for 3 years, and she had an interview with John Campbell about it, and all hell broke loose, literally.
Mislead the Royal Commission, yes or no?
Did I?
Did
most certainly
Did the
not.
government mislead the Royal Commission?
Most certainly not.
Right, well, I want to quote something to you. The Cabinet report that went to the Royal Commission said, and I quote, tests could not confirm whether or not GM material was present. Your cabinet told the Royal Commission that tests had confirmed GM material was present.
You may think this is a really smart way to set up the Prime Minister, but you are questioning on me on things I cannot possibly be expected to answer on.
I've seen the minutes
I'm
of
not
that cabinet
the specialist.
meeting. I've seen the minutes of that cabinet meeting that approved the statement that went to the Royal Commission. You were there that day, Prime Minister.
John, I do not run these issues.
You were there.
Okay, it's an interesting interview to watch, especially given that it's John Campbell going at Helen Clark back in the days when he batted on both sides. But it was a highly controversial issue. I think Helen Clark, what did he call him? A little snake or something? It wasn't complimentary anyway. But genetic engineering, I mean, there used to be protests everywhere, down Queen Street in Wellington. Lots of kids in that photo on the right. This is back in 2002. Back in 2019, the Chief Science Advisor to the Prime Minister actually said that we needed to bring this whole area up to date. Never heard another thing. GM is actually found in a genetically modified hamburger, which apparently is on the market, which is why I came up with that title, Do You Want Fries With That? I mean, that looks pretty gross to me. But anyway, there was a GM announcement, and I don't think I loaded that video. So anyway, we'll just pretend it's there. But basically, they said they're going to do away with genetic modification at the end of next year. And they said, look, it's time for us to catch up with the rest of the world on this issue. So genetic modification, has it turned into an acceptable issue where actually I haven't heard the Greens squeal in the last couple of days? In fact, I haven't heard from the Greens at all. Where are they?
Don't you love a bit of silence?
What's going on
I think
there?
it's a good thing. Long and short, the acceptability, the understanding of genetic modification or genetic engineering has become more accepted. Not by all. This announcement that a lot of the regulations will be relaxed will be disconcerting to some, but I think most of us now are relatively comfortable with it. I certainly am. So, technique, something called CRISPR-R, is a gene modification which does remarkable things in terms of helping humans, things like cancers. When we think too of the response to things like climate change, the fact that you can make crops which are resistant through gene editing is, I would argue, a good thing. So still going to be some regulation, but it's not going to be banned. And by the way, Bob, most of the rest of the world is already well advanced from us.
Yeah, I looked at ag research is trialling inserting a gene into white clover to reduce the methane emissions from livestock that eat it. So there we are, less cows farting and burping. And apparently the field trials are being done in Australia because the regulations are too tight in New Zealand. And there's also work at the Malayan in Wellington, the scientists at the Malayan Institute.
Malayan Institute.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say. They're engineering a patient's own cells to fight cancer. So it's been effective apparently against B-cell non-Hodgkin lymphomas. So, I mean, that sounds all very exciting. Gee, Simon, do you think one day we might actually get past the nuclear-free thing and actually think about nuclear energy?
Oh, God, you've thrown a big one out. I suspect it'll be a hard one to move past because it's become part of the New Zealand, if you will, myth or narrative. But you never know. I mean, it is one of the greenest forms of energy. So was genetic modification, wasn't it? I mean, we were GE-free. I mean, it was New Zealand, what was it, 100% pure? Yeah, I think Scott Morrison, the former Aussie PM, claimed to have made that phrase up. I think nuclear is more, as I said, more mythic. It's deeper within the Kiwi psyche than GE. So, but like so many of these things, if the country wants to have a discussion, it should. And that takes us, Bob, right back to where we started, of how often controversial or difficult conversations are being muted and stopped in this country, which it should be of a concern to everyone.
Yep. Okay, let's just check some of the comments. And Rebecca Charmaine, says keep New Zealand GE free. Rebecca says big fat no to gene editing of food. I agree. I'm not going to eat that burger. It looked gross. Give me a cow any day. Rosie says, no, there isn't. If it's free, then why aren't more people using it? Oh, hang on. It's talking about so these guys are having an argument about contraception. How did they get onto that? Oh, I think it's about benefit sanctions, isn't it? Rosie, contraception is available to a woman for free, no excuse there. This is what happens when I do the comments in reverse. Because, Suzanne says, OMG, get a brain. That's for you, Simon, that message.
Fair enough.
Rosie says, the silence of the Greens is deafening. Sue says, as much as I detest Helen Clark, this reminds me of how much we need feisty leaders who will take on the media. Joanne says, basic home economics and budgeting training is needed for solid parents on a benefit. And Kevin says, I know what it's like not being able to get a job. In the end, I took a stall at the farmer's market. It wasn't a living, but it helps. And Karen says, regardless of where you stand responsibility, the outcome of restricting money to new children of beneficiaries coupled with abortion law could mean more abortions, which is true. And Kevin says, if you can live indefinitely in a sub, you can run a city on nuclear energy. Is that right?
Oh, well, I mean, the nuclear reactors, which run the American submarines and the Russian ones, I mean, sort of indefinite life. I think one nuclear power station in New Zealand would sort all our needs. But let's not forget we live on an earthquake, volcanic prone land that complicates things just a little bit.
Yeah.
Fukushima, anyone?
Yeah. Okay, we've got about 2 minutes. Just one other topic, because you actually spoke at a conference at the beginning of the week. Oh, was I allowed to tell people that? Because it's a secret, eh? Anyway, foreign interference. Should we be concerned about overseas groups, Iran, Russia, China, Australia, my next door neighbour, he's dodgy as. I mean, are they watching our stuff, and should we worry about it?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, the Australians aside. So unfortunately, New Zealand is targeted by foreign interference. I've been explicitly targeted by the Chinese Communist Party. That's now a public record. A lot of dissenters, as in pro-democracy activists in New Zealand, have been targeted by the CCP, foreign agents and so forth. You've got disinformation campaigns being run by the likes of Russia, and we've got some good evidence too of what they call the IRGC, so that's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, a terrorist outfit that actually do extend their pressure to our Persian or Iranian community here. So we do have a problem with it, and our politicians need to get some chutzpah and talk about it more, because they just hide from it by and large.
Okay, and if I remember the news correctly, it was that there was some spying going on. Your emails were being spied on and the government didn't tell you? Is that right?
Yeah, they were targeting my email, Larissa Wall and Professor Anne-Marie Brady. So they were targeting our emails. They didn't get into them, but a Chinese-backed state-backed group were trying to get into our emails, and our intelligence agencies and Parliament didn't think it was worth telling us, which we called out. And fortunately now the protocols have been changed. So when this happens, and it will happen again to other MPs, that the intelligence agencies need to tell them.
Okay, let's just finish off with this, because we both need a bit of encouragement. Joanne says, excellent political chat on current issues. Thank you to both. Great to hear other views as well. That's exactly what we aim for. So thank you, Simon. I'll let you get back to the lemon and honey and hot drop drinks and get some love and tender care from your wife. And we will see you back next Thursday at 5 o'clock live. And of course, there's Straight Talk on Monday night at 8 o'clock as well. Thank you, Simon. Have a great week, everybody.